2021 began on a high note for us. January 2nd was our Christmas celebration for the Johnson clan. Because of other family commitments, that's generally the time when we can all gather together. We ate, we laughed, we exchanged gifts, we expressed our love, we laughed at the grandchildren. But it was also the last time I saw my son alive before I was called to his deathbed on March 24th in the VA hospital. In my past, I've had the opportunity to address those that attended both my father's funeral and my father-in-law's funeral. It's really what sons do. I never, however, expected to speak at the funeral of one of my sons, yet that is exactly what I found myself doing, honoring my son Jeremy, at his funeral in front of his family and his friends. Due to the pandemic and all its complexities, we were denied access to our son upon his admittance to the hospital shortly after that Christmas celebration. That Wednesday, the 24th of March, I received the call late in the afternoon that I should hurry to the hospital. They had previously denied me access to my son while he was fighting for his life, yet now, as the battle was finished, they granted a brief moment of access at the end. I remember hurrying frantically through seemingly miles of empty hospital corridors trying to get to him in time. To this day, I'm not really able to express what was going through my mind and heart, but I know I desperately wanted to be there in time. Well, my prayers were granted, and though my son seemed completely unaware of my presence, I was able to be with him during the final moments of his last feeble and labored breaths. As I sat next to him, my thoughts went to earlier and happier times, as they will. But sad to say, I also went to failures I felt as a father. Nevertheless, at 8:11 of that same night, he left us all behind as he entered into the presence of God. You see, like many of us, Jeremy's life had highs and lows. While he loved deeply, he also allowed himself to be hurt often. Though he cared intently, he struggled with serving practically, and while he dearly sought approval, he often was unable to meet the most minimal expectations. Still, my son sincerely loved God. He loved people and those he considered his friends, and he was fiercely loyal to them all. Raising children and living life is often not just loving, however. As fathers, we have dreams or at least hopes for our children, and as a result, we are often fixated on our desires for them to be successful, so much so that our love gets lost in our expectations and aspirations. Sometimes as fathers, we fixate on correcting what we see as weaknesses in our sons and our daughters, and we focus far too much on what our sons are doing or not doing, instead of simply modeling to them how to serve God and people. We look to see conformity to our expectations instead of seeing opportunity for God's purposes in them. With a sad heart, I have to admit that I was that kind of father. You see, I felt the need to tell things to Jeremy, to warn him of what was ahead, instead of pointing him to Jesus and the love that he desired for Jeremy to experience. I kept telling Jeremy far more than I listened to him. Regardless of all that, though, on that night of March 24th, Jeremy received full and complete revelation of Jesus and all he is. I believe that all the questions were answered, all the hurts were healed, and Jeremy finally experienced the complete understanding of God's love and freely given love. As men, we fight different battles at different stages of our lives. 3 of them, however, are very specific to 3 certain stages of our maturity. As men, we're first young men, then we're mature men, and finally, you get to my place where we're old men. Well, for young men, it's a time of discipline and expectations. The temptation, however, is for them to live for what will be and not recognize the value in the season they're in. They're constantly looking beyond the horizon instead of able to enjoy the purposes that they are being fulfilled in them right now. As mature men, this is a time of release and freedom and the opportunity to make decisions. They become in charge. The problem is the temptation then is to live for the moment and not pursue the self-control required to continue to mature in value. In other words, we become fixated on what we have now instead of being willing to plant for what we will have then. Old men, however, are a little bit different. For them, it's a time of reflection and self-examination. For them, the temptation is to live in the past and feel and experience regrets for the decisions that were either made or not made. So I find myself in this unique position looking back in memory about my relationship with my son and with all my sons. I think about the things that I wanted to tell him, but today I find myself no longer able to tell Jeremy anything. And instead, I find myself wondering if there are things now that Jeremy would want to tell me. You see, as I've prayed over all that has occurred in this last number of weeks, I've decided that after being in the presence of Jesus, there are things that Jeremy would want to tell me, would want me to know. And I think they're very specific. There's 5 of them that I want to share with you right now. I think Jeremy would tell me, number 1, to pursue God so aggressively that his faintest whisper has access to the deepest regions of my heart. He'd want me to know that I should stop making Jesus part of my life and allow him to be all of my life, to give myself up completely to the purposes that he has designed me for. Number 2, I believe my son would want me to understand or make every moment an opportunity for the presence of God to invade the affairs of men. I am to be his conduit for his purpose, his influence, his love, his character to impact those around me. That I should allow God to use me to impact every conversation, every relationship, and every intent of the heart. I think number 3, he would teach me or tell me, encourage me to forgive selflessly and love recklessly. Not so that people will accept and appreciate me, but as an instrument of God's love to them. I must realize that God's only representation of his love and personality in the earth is me. And if I don't image him, he remains hidden from those that need him the most. My responsibility is not to pursue what's important to me, but my responsibility is to image the things that are important to him. I believe the next thing that my son would want me to know and understand is to desire to make the passionate hunger for God's purpose and design in my life the highest priority and the breath and motivation behind everything I do. I must stop. I have to not just include God in my plans, but start allowing him to direct every step that I take. In other words, God should not be someone I draw into what I'm doing, but God should be someone that I follow after what he's doing. And finally, I think God that my son would want me to understand that I have nothing to fear but God. That should be willing to risk everything I have in obedience to Him because He's the source of all that I possess, and to trust in nothing but His mercy and grace. To understand that my relationship with my Father is all that I need and everything that will ever come toward me. Well, as a result of these realizations, we must be willing to make some commitments. And I believe that those commitments are that we should begin investing all that we have under our control in the success of the generations that follow us. It's no longer about us. It's no longer about what we can have or those around us have, but it's those that follow us. Who are they going to look to? Who are they going to gain the wisdom they need? You see, it's no longer a matter of what's important to me or you. It's what's important to God. We must decide that our preferences and comfort are really meaningless in light of the determined will and plan of God. We must choose to let God manifest Himself in whatever manner, in whatever method He chooses, in order to bring His glory to the earth. We must get to where Paul said, "For me to live is Christ." We don't do it for ourselves. So, as a result of all this, in the weeks ahead, I've decided to explore these very important realizations. This will not be a study in successful Christian living or dealing with our stresses and obstacles. It will instead be an intense pursuit after the effectiveness that serves the things of God, rather than the conditions necessary for my comfort and desires. In other words, I'm going to be a man that God can use, rather than desiring to be a man that God can bless. Well, I invite you to join us. I look forward to it as we endeavor to grow in these wisdoms and abilities. So, to end it all, right now my son has greater revelation than I can possibly attain this side of eternity. And I know that his desire now for me and others is to experience what Paul testified about to the Philippians when he said, "My passion is to be consumed with Him, not cling to my own righteousness based in keeping the written law. My only righteousness will be His, based on the faithfulness of Jesus Christ, the very righteousness that comes from God. And I continually long to know the wonders of Jesus and to experience the overflowing power of His resurrection working in me. I will be one with Him in the sufferings and become like Him in His death. Only then will I be able to experience complete oneness with Him in His resurrection from the realm of the dead." I'm Lane Johnson, and this is Battle Leadership.
Hey, thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with what's happening at Battle Leadership. Thanks.